So this is the presentation that Shannon and I created last year in celebration of Better Hearing and Speech Month. Better Hearing and Speech Month is celebrated through ASHA, which is my governing body, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, and we celebrate it every May. And each year has a different theme. So this year's theme is communication at work. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to share my screen like a champ. Okay. And we're going to go back to the first one. Rebecca and I were testing it out, and it works. Okay. This was our bulletin board from last year. We had a great bulletin board planned for this year, but nobody got to see it. So we'll just, keep it in our back pocket for next year. And you guys will, you'll be able to hopefully see it next year. So when we talk about speech and language, I get, no pun intended, but I kind of get on my high horse when people call me, a speech therapist, because for those of you who work with me, a lot of what me and Marla and, when we had Shannon, what we do is not so much speech. A lot of times there's not a lot of talking in what we do. There's a lot of language in what we do. So I always say that my profession is that I'm a speech language pathologist, and that I studied speech language pathology. So when we think of speech is how we say sounds and words. It's our articulation, our voice, our fluency, as opposed to language, which is the words we use and how we use them in order to communicate and get our wants and needs met. So for those of you who called in, I will give the slides to Rebecca, and she'll be able to send them out to you guys, because there are some cute graphics. So this little bunny, he's my favorite. If we're thinking about speech and we want to think about voice, right? Voice would be rabbit, right? I change my voice. I can change the intensity. I can change, the way that my voice sounds. If I'm thinking about articulation, some articulation errors might be, this is a wabbit. Right? You hear people put W's in for R's, they put a TH in for an S. Those are some articulation type errors that fall into my, speech category. And then fluency is when someone might stutter, or they might cluster on sounds. So a stuttering for, our little picture here would be, this is a rabbit, right? That's a fluency issue. It's disrupting the fluency of what I'm saying. Now, if we were to think of it as language, right? Language could be pragmatics. That is a social component. If I had a stuffed rabbit and I went to, hold it and you took it from me, that's socially inappropriate. That's a pragmatic component. If I were to think of it as grammar, right? This and rabbit is. I have taken that out of context. It's not grammatically correct. And then another part of language would be vocabulary. This is a cow. Well, that's not correct. It's a rabbit with a spot. So we have these two really great components, to what we do in my profession. So then in the scope of language, we have 5 domains. The 5 domains are, as you can see, phonology, morphology, pragmatics, semantics, and syntax, and they all work together to create language. So phonology is your sounds of language, right? Phonology, fun fact, goes back to the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were the group of people many, many years ago who created the alphabet. So phonology is the speech sounds. So if we think of the letter B, the letter B doesn't make the sound B. The letter B makes the sound B. The letter G makes the sound G. So that falls into our domain of phonology. For those of you, I don't know, who maybe were bored as a kid like I was, and you read the dictionary, you'll have your word, right? And then you'll have like a weird way that the word is written. That's called phonetics. And what we use is called and phonetics is the way that we kind of describe words and how they sound. So trying to think of a great example. The word pig would be spelled phonetically, the letter P, an lowercase I, and the letter G, but the word bite, they both have T in the middle. The word bite would be a B, an uppercase I, and the letter T. E, we don't really say the sound E at the end, so phonology is really our way of describing words and how they sound. Morphology has to do with units of words. So a great example of this is the word dog. Dog is one morpheme. It has one meaning. But if we add the S onto end, S has its own meaning. It means plural. So that is made up of two parts or two morphemes, and that falls in the domain of morphology. Those of you who work with me know pragmatics is near and dear to my heart. I love social language. So this is things like eye contact, being an appropriate listener, sitting up tall when you make eye contact, making sure you're listening, saying hi when you greet somebody, saying bye when you leave. Those all fall into this social pragmatic category. Semantics is word meaning, understanding that if I showed you a picture of a bunny, this is a bunny. I understand that this is a bunny versus a picture of a cow. You can tell the difference between bunny and cow. Syntax is your grammar and putting it all together, understanding that it's not a apple, it's an apple. It's not a orange, it's an orange. Those little grammatical concepts that are really important to the English language. And all of that just kind of blends in together into one whole session. It's something, that I'm always thinking about, always working on. And I hope that through this presentation, things will kind of make more sense if you think about, any times you've worked with Marla, worked with me, you're like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So also in the great domain of language, we have our expressive language and our expressive language. So if someone has, some difficulties in receptive language, they're going to have a hard time understanding what people are saying. Receptive language is your comprehension component versus expressive language, which is your ability to express your ideas. So if someone has difficulty in the area of expressive language, they have difficulty sharing their thoughts, ideas, or feelings. This can be, you see this a lot, especially in my sessions, maybe I'll hold up a flashcard and I'll say, point to pizza. Sorry, guys, I'm making dinner and I'm really hungry. So write point to pizza. And if they can point to the letter pizza, they know the concept of pizza. They know what it looks like. They might not be able to express that, but they can point to a picture. So we can make things easy by giving them 2 choices. We can make it hard and give them 4 choices, and that kind of ups the ante to test their receptive comprehension or their receptive language. I read this great quote. May is also Stroke Awareness Month, and I read this great quote one time that said, just because I can't speak doesn't mean I don't have anything to say. And that really hits home for me because, there's a lot of our clientele, whether they're a writer or they're a client in our therapy program, they have a lot going on. They just might not have the ability to get that out. And it's my job as a therapist to figure out how to, make them able to express their wants and needs and communicate socially and, have a good time in life. So then we get into learning types. I don't know if you guys are familiar with learning types, if you ever had to take one of these tests in school. But the 3 main learning types are kinesthetic, visual, and auditory. So our visual learners are those learners who learn through seeing. Our auditory learners are those who learn from hearing. And our kinesthetic learners are those who learn by doing. And all of these, everybody is kind of a mix of all 3, but everybody does have a primary way that they learn. For me, I'm a visual learner. I can hear somebody talk and they can lecture at me in grad school and it goes right over my head. But if I can see it in front of me and I can read it, I tend to retain it better. A lot of our participants, especially in our PT and OT program, kinesthetically, all that movement they're getting from the horse is helping their body learn how to do things again, right? Or maybe learn how to do things for the first time. So it really depends on the type of learner that you are and what's going to kind of work best for you. So if we look at our next page, I hope you guys can see it. When I do this presentation in the office and it's on that big screen and it's so far away, we have a hard time seeing it. But I think this kind of makes it a little easier. So this is a great chart that shows you, something that a modality that you might have, whether it's spelling, reading, handwriting, something you have to do, and how the different learning types would handle that type of thing. So for example, reading, right? Someone who's a visual learner, they like the descriptions. Sometimes we stop reading and stare into space and imagine the scene, right? We have intense concentration. I know that when I read a book, I'm in somebody's house. So I can think of this great, when I read Harry Potter, I thought of when, I don't know if anybody's Harry Potter fans, but the Dursleys' house, when I was a kid and I was reading that house was my aunt's house because I could put the characters in that place. I had a very vivid imagination of that in my head. But someone who's an auditory learner, they might enjoy dialogues and plays more, right? The things that they can hear. They avoid lengthy descriptions. This presentation might not be great for them because there's just so much going on. They tend to be unaware of illustrations and they tend to move their lips or vocalize along, with what's happening. They really get their information auditorily, and when there's a lot of visual distraction going on, it inhibits their learning style. Versus someone who's kinesthetic, they prefer stories with actions. They might fidget when they read. They might not be an avid reader, right? Reading takes a lot of sitting. That's not really their forte. So this is just a great way to think of all these different modalities in our life and how different people would view those differently depending on their learning style. So one of the things I'm going to have you guys do, take a quick look at this chart, and if you want to put in the chat box what you think your main learning style is. Are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory? Or are you kinesthetic? And I'll give you guys a couple minutes, and then I'll have Rebecca tell me what you guys said. And go. Don't everybody type at once. Ah. I lied, Rebecca. I can actually see it. I know.
Yeah, it pops up. I didn't realize it would pop up.
JK. All right, we already have two differences. Barbara's an auditory learner. Allison's a visual learner. Bridget and Mary Ann are both visual learners. I got a lot of people in my camp. Yes, Laura. Let's all read things together. Maybe we should have a book club. That'd be fun. I'll do a book club.
We'll do a book club?
Yeah, why not? Nikita's a visual learner.
I'm a kinesthetic learner, if anyone cares.
That makes a lot of sense, Rebecca.
This is Helen. I can't see the presentation.
Yeah, Helen. So what we're gonna do for you is I'm gonna have Rebecca send you the slides.
Like now or after the call?
I can see if I can have Rebecca send it to you now.
Okay, and if not, I'll look at it later.
Okay. Yeah, that'd probably be best. Because you're welcome. I would have to get out of the presentation, but right after this, we'll save it as a PDF and we'll send it your way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Darian is also a visual learner. We have a lot of visual learners in this group. I like it, which is interesting because...
And welcome to Janie, who just joined.
Janie Murphy. Awesome, awesome. All right, we're gonna go back to our presentation. Thank you guys for sharing. It's really great just to see all the different ways that people learn, and that kind of helps not only me, but kind of helps Rebecca too, knowing how people learn and how they like information presented to them. Really kind of helps us with whether it's other volunteer CEUs or orientation and training. It's really helpful. So thank you guys. So now that you kind of have a broader understanding of what exactly speech and language compromises, we're going to get into some barriers to communicating. A lot of the clients that I have and a lot of clients, at Mainstream, they're coming for a reason. They have some barrier to getting their wants and needs met or communicating with their peers, with adults and things like that. So one of the first barriers is no incidental learning. They require direct instruction. So if you think back, I don't know, when you were a kid, or if you have kids and you think of the way that they learn things, you never really went straight up to them and said, okay, Rebecca, the stove is hot. We're not going to touch the stove because it's hot. A lot of times they learn, right? Maybe they walk by it and they kind of put their hand and they feel it's hot and they pull it away, right? That's that incidental learning.
Can Can I put a quick into you as an example?
Do it again.
When I was a kid, I actually put my hand flat on an iron and held it there. So I require a lot of hands-on learning not to do things.
Right. That was a barrier to communicating for you, right? So Rebecca would need someone to explicitly directly instruct her that, this is hot, as opposed to other kids who could maybe know that when they put their hand on the iron, it was hot and to pull it away. So a lot of my clients, or a lot of the clients at Mainstream, they need that direct instruction. They don't really have the ability to learn incidentally. Neurological impairments, if someone maybe had a stroke in utero, or they were born with cerebral palsy, that is a neurological impairment. That is like a brain wiring type impairment. You could have cognitive or learning disabilities that affect your ability to learn. Some great examples of this could be ADD or ADHD, right? Those are types of learning disabilities. Physical impairments, a lot of times thinking of me, impairments in the mouth. So if you had, trauma during birth or something happened, earlier in life when you're learning to speak and you can't move your tongue the right way, or you don't have a lot of, we call it jaw grating, right? You really can't move your jaw or your lips much. You're going to have trouble expressively communicating, right? There's not really much, or there's still some stuff going on up here, but you don't have the ability to express here. Extensive hospital stays for kids who are in the NICU. And you think of the time that they spend in these little incubators, they're not getting a lot of tactile information, a lot of auditory information, and that can be a barrier to communication later in life. Processing delays. We do have some clients who have processing delays. One of my great examples of this, for HIPAA purposes, we aren't going to say specific client names, but I am going to give examples of scenarios with them. So I do have a client who has a 45-second processing delay. So you can tell this client something, or you can ask this client to do an action or complete an activity, and it will take this client a full 45 seconds to comprehend what you ask them to do. So just for fun, so you can, really see how long that is, I have set a timer for 45 seconds. And we're all going to stare at each other for 45 seconds. There you go. So if you're thinking in a session, you're like, wow, Mel asked this question like 5 seconds ago and they haven't answered, we have to think of the processing delays that someone might have. I learned very early in grad school to be comfortable in the silence, really allowing someone that time to process what I'm saying and then to process their response or their movement. And then finally, a lack of interaction with others. You see this in a lot of poor neighborhoods, or for kids whose families work a lot and they're home a lot. Lack of interaction with others is really going to affect their pragmatic communication, their ability to understand what's socially appropriate, what's not socially appropriate. And a lot of anecdotal research is coming out right now for kids who are being homeschooled, and the lack of interaction that they're having with their peers due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and kind of what that's going to look like for their increase in communication kind of as the years go on. So that's going to be from an intellectual and research perspective, that's going to be really something interesting to follow as the years go on. So then we get into the different ways that someone can communicate. They maybe they have the ability to communicate verbally, right? They can use words to communicate, and that's how we communicate regularly. That has, even though it's verbal, it has both the receptive and the expressive component. So I'm communicating my words out expressively and you understand them, but also for you to speak back verbally to me, I have to be able to process that in my brain. So these, all the modalities of communication on this page also have that receptive and expressive part to them. We can do gestural. A lot of us do this in conjunction with verbal speech already. You can see me, my hands are going everywhere. This is our gestural communication, but you can also have kids who just gesture. You see this a lot in little kids. Maybe they'll just they'll point at things. They don't have that verbal part yet, but they'll point. When we say yes, no, right? Yes, no, that's a gesture. One of my favorite ways to communicate is through sign language. And so this is a visual language that is its own language. ASL does have its own grammar structure, and it is considered a language, which is great. I'm sure Bridget Torsivia could give us a whole slideshow of her own on sign language, since it is now being taught in schools as a foreign language, which I think is awesome. And I'm bummed that I couldn't take it as a foreign language when I was in school years ago. So what's great about visual language, the brain is going to process that linguistic information through the eyes. So it's great for maybe those who are visual learners, and those who are deaf or hard of hearing really rely on their vision to communicate. So one of the great things that I learned when I took our sign language class at Mainstream with my friend Christine Chenoweth is how much the shape, placement, movement of the hands, as well as facial expressions really come into sign language. How when you ask a question, your eyebrows go up, right? It's all about that facial expression, which also plays a huge component in what I do on a daily basis. If I work with a kid and I just kind of keep my face like nothing about that is engaging, right? So a lot of times, especially when I work with younger kids, I make a lot of big movements. I open my eyes really wide. You don't say, right? You make all these faces. That kind of helps with getting your point across. And then a lot too of what you see at Mainstream is what we call augmentative or alternative communication. So this is, as it says, a multimodal form of communication that incorporates the individual's full communication abilities. And there can be ones that are high tech or ones that are low tech. So low tech ones would be, I don't know if you guys have seen me with my little board with the pictures on it that are Velcroed on. And maybe we want to work on saying go. And so the client picks up the horse and hands it to me, and that means they want to go. That is a very low tech communication board. And then we have something high tech, like this, like the iPad. So we do have some clients who use iPads to communicate, and they might use an app like this. This is called Prolo to Go. I'm going to try. I hope you guys can see it. I can't see me. But if they want to communicate with me, right, they have to understand, okay, I go to chat. Ooh, it's hard to see upside down. And I go to hello. Hello. And it speaks for them. This is also called a speech generating device. One of the great activities that I do when I do this course in person is I will pass the iPad around, and I'll have two people try to communicate using the iPad or using Prolo to Go. And it takes a lot to be able to kind of navigate an AAC device. It's really understanding categories and understanding that, okay, if I need to say hi to Rebecca, I need to go to my chat button. Or if I want to say, where I want to go eat lunch, I have to know that that's in the places category. So a lot of times we'll work on those very basic skills first. Pizza, is pizza, something you drink or something you eat, right? It goes in the eat category. And that's a really basic type of skill to be able to use an AAC device later in life. I get nervous with AAC devices around horses. There's just a lot of technology in there, and I always hope, and I always make sure my families back up the information on there, because they do take quite a long time to program, and for me to learn. And when I have 10 or 20 clients who all use a device, it takes a while for me to remember what the device looks like, where things are. And especially now doing a lot of telepractice and working with my clients remotely, I really have to remember where information is to kind of help my families figure out how to say hello or how to say, I want pizza for lunch. You know, it takes a lot to kind of figure that out. So then our 3-step model for language development, this is something that you see in children who are typically developing and non-typically developing. For our clients who are non-typically developing, they might get stuck in a stage. They might not make it to the symbolic communication stage. So our pre-intentional stage is a non-intentional action that a communication partner attaches meaning to. So a great example is when you're interacting with a baby, right? Maybe, I don't know, a 6-month-old or an 8-month-old. Trying to think of my little cousin Maddie and kind of what I do with her. So if Maddie's eating a new food for the first time and you give her, I don't know, carrots, and she goes, ooh, and you go, oh, is that yucky? Right? You're putting that meaning onto her facial expression. My little cousin Maddie doesn't know what yucky means. She just knows this, whatever you just gave me, oh, no, thank you. And you put that meaning onto it for her. We then move into the intentional but pre-symbolic stage. And here, on the part of the child or the toddler, this requires an understanding that specific actions impact others. So they understand that if I do something to you, then you're going to give me something back. So this could be facial expressions, eye gaze, posture, and it could be conventional. It makes sense to you. It could be non-conventional. It doesn't make any sense to you, but it got an action out of you, or it got some sort of response after you or from you. So I think of when I was a kid, I don't know how I remember this, and eventually I paired a word with it, but I have very, very distinct memories of being next to my dad, looking up at my dad, and putting my arms up. I knew that if I put my arms up, he's going to lift me up in the air and he's going to hold me. So that was me understanding that my action would impact him and that I would get something out of it. And then we move on to symbolic communication, which is where I would look up, lift my hands, and say, uppy, uppy, right? I had that symbolic communication. I was sounds to symbols, that if I'm going to say up, right, our sound is right? Putting those together. Could be letter symbols and writing. If you were going to write the word up, it could be signing up. There's a photo of up, right? There's all these different ways for symbolic communication to take place, but children need to go through all 3 phases in order to get to symbolic communication. You can't skip pre-intentional and head right to symbolic, speaking with your sound symbols and things like that. But some of our clients do get stuck. If you think of some of the littler kids that we work with who you would think would already have some words, but they're not quite there yet. They do a lot of pointing. They open their eyes, right? They know that if they get to the top of the ramp and they wait, the horse will come, right? They figure out that their actions impact others. So it's kind of cool. It's cool on both senses to work with the non-typical population and really see what life is like for them. But also for me to work with, typically developing children and be like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Look how quickly they just did that. I work on that forever. So development is cool. Highly suggest everybody reads up on it if you can't sleep at night. So then the category that I fall into for communication is this idea of total communication. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the paragraph that total communication incorporates all means of communication: signs, natural gestures, finger spelling, body language, facial expressions, listening, lip reading, and speech to optimize language development. The total communication philosophy adapts to the individual needs of the child in order to facilitate understanding, learning, and language development. So really the idea behind this is that I'm going to talk with someone and I'm going to communicate with someone whichever works best for them in the present situation. Maybe sometimes we'll work on verbal speech. Maybe sometimes we'll work with gesture. Maybe sometimes we'll talk and use our AAC device. There's various combinations that you can use and various ways that you can, get meanings across. And at the end of the day, we want communication to be easy, right? Communication shouldn't be hard. Shouldn't be, Even if you have some impairments or some difficulties, I shouldn't make it harder for you by only letting you use your device or only letting you use sign language. If you have multiple ways of getting your wants and needs met, I'm going to let you use them because I do the same, right? If I wanted something over here, but my mouth is full of dinner, I'm going to point, right? I'm going to use gesture. I'm not going to wait to be able to say something. So this whole idea of total communication is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And kind of remembering that language is expressive and receptive, right? Total communication encompasses all of that. So if we think of strategies to assist with communication at mainstream, whether you're working in a therapy session or in an adaptive riding lesson, maybe you have some free time and you come and work with our seniors who come and visit us, right? These are all strategies that can kind of help you, whatever program you work with. So one of them would be modifying the environment. We might limit everything that we see. I have this problem a lot when, my guys and I were stuck inside all winter, and then we'll go outside for the first time and adaptive is back and they're outside. And there's so much happening visually that I can't get them to focus on me. So maybe I'll turn around. Maybe we won't be looking at the arena. Maybe we'll be looking at a tree or at, Neelik's whole smorgasbord of, wood they have going on over there. I'm trying to limit the information that's coming in visually so they can listen to me. Or vice versa, I might limit the auditory stimuli. A lot of times if there's a lot of talking going on, or if there's a thunderstorm and there's a lot of rain on the building, that's too much happening and too much information coming in through their ears. So I'm going to go find a quiet space. You guys have been with me when that's happened, and I'm not getting a lot on the horse. We get off, we go inside, we wait for the rain to calm down, we come back out, we get back on. You also want to limit the use of verbal language. This is especially in direction giving. And I am notorious for not doing this. I like to give a lot of direction so that someone's successful, but the more direction that I give, it can be very distracting. So if I have a client, we'll use little Miss Reagan in this picture. Said, okay, Reagan, today we're gonna get on Dart and we're gonna go see Miss Allison and Miss Anna. We're gonna go and we're gonna get on the ramp and then we're gonna stop and we're gonna wait and Dart's gonna come in. That is so much information and I can really, really pare that down. Okay, Reagan, up the ramp, wait, here comes Dart, stop, time to get on, right? I'm really paring that down so she has the time to process what I'm saying, which leads to allow for more processing time. A lot of times, again, I'm guilty of this. We learn as we go. I want things to happen rapid fire, and I get going too much, and then the session just implodes on itself because I don't allow for processing time. So a lot of times, if I'm on the ramp, right, and I wait for someone to say something, or I wait for them to acknowledge that, okay, Dart has stopped. It's time to move on. Or time to get on, right? I kind of have that processing time. Or even when they get on and we say, okay, what do you say? Ready, set, go, right? You have to give them that time to really process what you're asking. And then a big one too is getting the individual's attention. I have the clients do a lot of this with the volunteers, so we know who they're speaking to, and they'll just look and say, hi, how are you? Well, there's 4 of us around. Who are you talking to? They have to get your attention. So it goes the other way too. If little Miss Reagan is not paying attention, you can say, hey, Reagan, and sustain that eye contact with her. That's a huge part of language, and let your communicative partner know that you're in sync with them and you're paying attention to what they're saying. I'm going to embarrass someone who's sitting right next to me, but when Jeff and I went on our first date, I was so harped on the eye contact, and I was like, oh God, he's not looking at me. Maybe he doesn't like me, but it's something that I'm so in tune with and something that I, harp on so much because I work on it so much that I forget that not everybody does that. And I think he still likes me, so I think we're good. And at the end of the day, it's all about making communication easy. We really want to honor what someone is saying or feeling. You'll see this a lot when someone says, I don't want to get on today. I don't want to see the horse today. Okay, thank you for using your words. Thank you for communicating that with me. And we don't have to do that. We see this a lot. The opposite, though, when kids use it to get out of doing things, oh, I don't want to do that this week. And that turns into week 4, week 6, and you're like, oh, what are you doing with this situation? So it's a fine line of honoring, but also setting boundaries. Utilizing repetition when necessary. There's a great infographic coming up on the next page, but children with language delays need to hear words twice as often as typical children. That is, it's a really startling statistic once we see it on the next page. That's gonna, I hope, hit home for some of you guys. So again, I can't say it enough. It's all about making it easy. We're not trying to make it hard for somebody. We're just trying to help them, get their wants and needs met in a way that makes life easy for them. So for our statistic here, by 18 months, babies have heard 4,380 words of spoken language, and we don't expect them to be fluent speakers yet. So if you think of an 18-month-old, Maddie's not quite there yet. She'll only be a year, but how much language she's spoken, I don't expect her to give me that much yet. She's just kind of taking it all in. Her brain's like a little sponge, and she's absorbing all that information. And if we have clients who only use an AAC device, only use that iPad, if AAC learners only see symbols modeled for communication twice weekly for 20 to 30 minutes, right, in a generic speech session, it's going to take them 84 years for them to have the same exposure to aided language as an 18-month-old has had to spoken language. So regardless of the communication style, of the communication type, we always want to speak to someone. We always want to kind of give them that auditory information and those words, because again, receptively, they're taking it all in. Expressively, they need some help getting it out. Whew, I feel like I flew through that. Okay, it's time for questions. So just remember, we are recording this, so we don't want to use specific clients. I used Reagan because she was in that picture and everybody could see her, but we don't want to use specific clients, their names, or we don't want to ask about specific clients, but you can keep it more general. And I'm not gonna stop presenting. All right, I'm ready for questions.
Anyone?
Any takers?
I have a question.
Okay, thanks, Laura. I was getting nervous. I was getting a little sweaty.
Well, I found that there were certain clients that had the little computers when we were writing, and they would start relying on the computer more. And when they didn't have it, the speech therapist was able to get them to communicate without the device.
Right.
And do you think that sometimes these devices, well, they make it easier. They make it easier for the clients to communicate, but they also take away the other methods that they use to communicate.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Is kind of, they start to rely on one thing more than the other because it is easier. So that's that total communication piece, and it really comes to knowing your client and understanding, maybe what works in that moment, but also what's the overall goal. A lot of our clients, they come to mainstream 1 time a week, but they're in school and they get speech 3 times a week in school, and school's really working on the iPad. It's a hard, I don't want to say battle, but sometimes there has to be some communication between the other speech therapists. See, I said it myself, speech language pathologists, and myself, to really figure out what's going to be the best modality or the best style for a student or a child or a client. Because I also don't want the opposite to happen where, they're working with the iPad in school 3 days a week, but then they come to mainstream and Miss Mel doesn't use it at all. There's not a lot of consistency there. And I want them to know that when they have that iPad, they can use it in school, they can use it at mainstream, they can use it when they go to a restaurant. So I don't really have a great answer because it's really, client specific and really depends on, how they're going to get their needs met in the most efficient way. Answer your question, maybe? I hope. Silence is good, makes me feel good.
So, Mel, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Meryl. I have a question. I dialed in by phone.
Oh, so great to hear your voice.
Yeah, I hope you're well. It's great to hear your voice too, and thank you so much for this. So my question is, for the therapy clients who are working on communication skills with you, how does being on a horse augment that?
Great question. So if we're thinking about, this is kind of has two parts to it. So for some clients, we can think about the movement from a core strength perspective. So for speaking, you need breath support, right? You need that core strength here in your tummy to be able to kind of work your lungs and have your rib cage expand. And I can't think of the word, de-expand is not the right, compress, maybe, compress, to be able to fill your air with lungs so that you can produce speech. And so for clients who have a weak core, being on the horse, as all of our riders know, really works your core muscles, which is going to strengthen their lungs, which is going to strengthen their ability to produce speech. We can also look at it in the different planes of movement that horses have. I have some clients who in their mouth kind of get stuck in one plane. They can only move, forward or backwards in their mouth. They don't have a lot of lateral movement with their tongue or a lot of lateral movement with their lips or their jaw. So maybe I'll put them on a horse, kind of like, I'll use the example of, oh no, Ellie. Ellie has lateral movement. So if someone is stuck in this back and forth position, I'm not going to put them on a dart who only moves back and forth. I'm going to put them on an E, or not an E, and I'm going to put them on an Ellie who's going to give them that side to side movement and move them out of this plane that they're stuck on to hopefully get some more movement in their jaw, in their tongue, in their lips to, facilitate correct production of sounds in their mouth. From a sensory component, if I have someone who comes in a little over aroused and I can't really get anything done because they're going a mile a minute, I might put them on a Mel, right? Mel's going to calm down their sensory system, and then I can go ahead and pair a language task on top of that. Or vice versa, I have someone come in, they're all a little loosey-goosey, right? And they can't really do much because they're just a little unbalanced, a little all over the place. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put them on like a mini, someone who's going to give them a lot of movement, a lot of input, organize their system, so I can then pair a language task on top of that. It's not fair to ask for something that's hard when your bodies are organized. I'm going to try to organize your body first, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pair my language task on top of that. We also can get into like the motivational component of it. I work with kids who sit inside a classroom, who sit inside the speech room with the speech teacher, and they play games and life is great. Then they go on their merry little way. Or they can come to mainstream and, sometimes we get to go on a horse and we get to go outside and we can talk about the trees. We can talk about the things we see, the things we hear, the things we smell. Anybody who's worked with certain male clients love to talk about poop. It's a great thing, right? Everybody loves poop. So there's a lot more in this natural environment that's going to elicit that language than you'll get in a room with four walls. How is that answered?
That's great.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome. Glad we recorded that one.
No, don't.
Anyone else?
Mel, this is Helen.
Hi, Helen.
Hello. When you have a client, young, old, whatever, who you're communicating with, and they're all over the place on the horse, is that because they are having a problem receiving what you're saying, or are they just not interested in doing the session like they do every week? Do they know the difference?
Helen, the age-old question that I go through every session. It's tough. It's tough to kind of figure it out, and that's where I have to kind of figure out a pattern. If I see that, if normally they're engaged and they're great and they'll participate in the session, and they kind of have an off week and they're not about it, okay. But if that's continuing every week, I need to figure out what's going on. And it could be, if we're using equine movement as a treatment tool, it could be maybe the horse is no longer a great match. Maybe the horse is giving them too much input and their body can't handle it. Maybe they've moved on and they're not getting enough input, so they're all a little loosey-goosey because they're trying to find that information elsewhere. So maybe it's time for a horse switch. You see this a lot come January, February. And I totally get it, because the kids are done with the 4 gray walls of the indoor, as am I. They're just done. They don't want to see it. They don't want to deal with it. They want to go out, and we can't because it's dark, so they're going to act out. But it's hard to figure that out. And it's a lot of, we call that, the fancy word for it is clinical reasoning. You know, what's the reason that this is happening and how can I fix that?
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Mel.
Hi.
Are the two the same? I can't tell.
Is this Barbara?
Yeah, yep. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't tell if there was 2 of us talking or not. I really like that point about the 45-second processing. That's something that, as a sidewalker or something, I don't necessarily know or pick up on until you dramatically showed it. What advice do you have to us as sidewalkers or volunteers to help figure out, don't keep saying hi, give them time to process. Like, is there any advice that we could have as a sidewalker to make your job easier?
You guys already do a great job of making my job easier. I think a lot of it is kind of picking up on my cues. I know in my sessions, I try to model for you guys what I would like, because I don't want, to interrupt the greeting with, okay, poor Reagan, I'm gonna, keep using her. Okay, Reagan, now Barbara's gonna say hi to you. Listen for Barbara to say, because that's not a fluid communication. No one does that for you, when you go out to a restaurant or you go to a concert, right? So I don't want clients to rely on those cues. I want them to be more incidental, not so much direct instruction. So having you guys pick up on my cues, but don't be afraid to ask, if a couple minutes before the session you say, hey, I know we're working with Reagan today, and I noticed last week you did XYZ. What can I do, to make it easier or to help carry over that skill from you to me? Because that's a big part too. As nice as it is for clients to greet you guys, I'm really trying to have them carry over that skill from me to 2 other people or 3 other people, so that they can hopefully then carry that skill out into the community or out into, school or what have you. So don't be afraid to ask, whether it's before the session or at the beginning of the session. But, the point that I would try to make is, as I say, pick up what I'm putting down.
That's good.
I'm funny, Allison, let me tell you. After 12 weeks of being in my house, I'm a hoot. Anyone else?
No, the 45-second rule is huge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I worked with Emma for 2 sessions before talking with you. I was like,
right.
Okay, now I understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I get it.
Yep.
So.
And everybody kind of has a little bit of that, and part of that too could be attention getting. If someone's talking to me and they haven't gotten my attention, I'm still thinking about my dinner that's sitting on the stove, right? I'm not really thinking about you talking to me. But if someone goes, hey, Mel, oh, hey, what's up? Yeah, I'm here, I promise. So it's that, they all kind of play in together. And even though we can't tell you guys, based on, because of HIPAA and because of not being able to give you personal information, we can't really give it to you directly, but we can. Don't be afraid to ask us for little tidbits to kind of help and make that easier for you. And know that my brain is always in 10 different places, and I might forget to tell you. So don't be afraid to interrupt me, I promise. Are we good? Are we great? Everyone looks great. I'm so happy to see all of you. You make me so happy. I miss all of you. My life is so boring without you guys.
Oh, I know, Mel. It's just like such a gray day when you don't get to talk to me. I get it.
I talk to Rebecca every day, please. But you guys will be happy to know in my spare time, I'm learning to cook. I cooked like a whole bunch of meals. The house is still standing. I'm using my time. Maybe I'll make you all dinner one night. We'll have a big old potluck.
Oh,
You heard her, guys.
Mark it on your calendar. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and thank you for joining us for our presentation for Better Hearing and Speech Month. If you have a question that kind of comes to you later, don't be afraid to shoot me an email. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. Thank you guys so much.
Bye,
thank
everybody.
you.
So good to see
Thanks, Val.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you.
Guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Have a good evening, all of you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.